Who should we blame for the tangerine twat waffle in the Oval Circus right now? Should it be the 77 million Americans that voted for him? Should it be the Republican Party? Or should it be the Democratic Party who didn't have a candidate strong enough to beat the tangerine twat waffle in a presidential election? If you picked any of those options, you're completely wrong, and you're missing the big point. Last presidential election had over 268 million Americans eligible to vote in this country for the President of the United States. 75 million Americans voted for Harris, while 77 million Americans voted for the tangerine twat waffle in the Oval Circus now. But it was the 112 million Americans who stayed silent that had the greatest power in doing nothing to dictate who was president of the United States. If you don't believe me, here's the math. Although 77 million Americans voted for the tangerine twat waffle in the Oval Circus, that only makes up 30% of the total body or population of voters that could have voted in the election. That left 112 million Americans that could have voted, should have voted, and damn well should have made their voice heard, but stayed silent because they either thought their voice didn't matter, they didn't have the ability to get there because they're too busy working 2 to 3 jobs, and the ballots were closed before they could actually cast a vote, or the Krispy Kreme nation that we have here treated the obligation to vote like a gym membership and just said, nah, I'm good. With a 60% obesity rate in this country, perhaps maybe most of those 112 million Americans that didn't vote confused exercising their democratic rights with physical exercise. One way or another, they stayed silent when their voices were needed the most. Of course, it's easy to yell, be upset with the 77 million Americans that actually did exercise their democratic rights, voted for the tangerine twat waffle, but the fact that you want to ignore or somehow allow those 112 million Americans who did absolutely nothing, just sat there and watched the house be set on fire, are the ones that you should be holding accountable right now, because their silence was the biggest vote in this country. Their silence was what the Democrats and the Republicans all want, because while you stay silent, they're allowed to manipulate the ones that actually act. By doing nothing, you allowed other people to dictate what your future, what your children's future was going to be. I dare you to make your voice heard now. Instead of complaining about what has happened, why don't you work hard to help the rest of us change what is happening now? Stop making your should list to a must list. You must stand up. You must make your voice heard. You must vote in the next elections or anything to help change our futures from what it is to what it can be. Leave a comment or perhaps blue hearts showing that you want change and you don't want the